The wedding guests had barely settled into their seats when the distant sound of sirens echoed across the peaceful countryside. Within seconds, flashing red and blue lights reflected off the white roses decorating the aisle, replacing smiles with fear. Mothers pulled their children closer. Elderly grandparents stood frozen in disbelief. The bride's hands began to tremble as police cruisers rolled through the entrance of the elegant estate. Across the street, one neighbor watched proudly from her porch, convinced she had done the right thing by reporting what she called a suspicious gathering. She had no idea that the groom she had judged without a single conversation wasn't just another guest. He was the very police chief every officer in those patrol cars proudly served. Before we continue, if you believe kindness is stronger than prejudice, and everyone deserves respect regardless of their background, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to our channel for more emotional stories that restore faith in humanity. Marcus Hill had spent his entire life proving people wrong. Born into a neighborhood where opportunity was rare and expectations were painfully low, he learned from childhood that some people would judge him before they ever learned his name. His parents worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table, teaching him that dignity came from honesty, discipline, and compassion. There were nights when electricity barely stayed on and mornings when his mother skipped breakfast so her children could eat. Yet despite every hardship, Marcus refused to let bitterness define him. He studied while others doubted him, worked while others rested, and dreamed while many insisted those dreams were impossible. Years later, those sacrifices transformed into remarkable achievements. Marcus graduated at the top of his class, joined the police department, and earned respect not through fear but through fairness. Every promotion came after countless sleepless nights protecting neighborhoods, comforting victims, mentoring young officers, and reminding everyone under his command that a badge represented service rather than power. Eventually, after decades of unwavering integrity, he became the city's police chief. Yet despite carrying one of the highest positions in law enforcement, Marcus remained the same humble man who still visited his childhood neighborhood and quietly paid grocery bills for struggling families without expecting recognition. Standing beside him on this unforgettable afternoon was Elena, the woman who had loved him long before success ever arrived. She had met Marcus during college when both of them were balancing classes with part-time jobs and endless responsibilities. She admired not his ambition alone but his kindness, his patience, and his ability to forgive even those who underestimated him. Together they survived financial struggles, exhausting work schedules, and years of delayed dreams before finally planning the wedding they had imagined for so long. Their ceremony was intentionally simple yet breathtaking. White flowers lined the stone pathway leading toward a historic chapel surrounded by towering oak trees. Soft music drifted through the warm summer air while family members laughed, hugged, and celebrated a love story built on sacrifice rather than luxury. Friends had traveled across the country to witness this moment because they understood what Marcus and Elena represented. They were proof that perseverance could overcome almost any obstacle. Unfortunately, not everyone saw the celebration with joy. Across the road lived a woman named Linda, who had spent years believing that unfamiliar faces automatically meant trouble. Watching dozens of elegantly dressed black families arriving in expensive cars challenged every assumption she had quietly carried for decades. Instead of introducing herself or welcoming her temporary neighbors, she allowed suspicion to replace curiosity. Without witnessing any crime or disturbance, she convinced herself that something illegal must be happening. Within minutes she called emergency services, exaggerating her concerns until dispatchers believed immediate police response was necessary. The wedding changed instantly. The music stopped. Conversations disappeared into nervous silence. Guests exchanged frightened glances as multiple patrol cars entered the property with lights flashing. Children clutched their parents while photographers lowered their cameras. Some elderly relatives had lived through painful moments of discrimination decades earlier, and the arrival of law enforcement reopened old wounds they thought had finally healed. Fear spread quietly across the crowd because no one knew why officers had interrupted such a peaceful celebration. Marcus noticed the anxiety growing around him. He gently squeezed Elena's hand before stepping away from the altar with remarkable calmness. There was no anger in his expression. No panic. Years of leadership had taught him that true strength begins with composure. The responding officers approached professionally, prepared to investigate the complaint they had received. Then something extraordinary happened. One young officer looked carefully at the groom approaching them. His eyes widened with disbelief. Another officer recognized him seconds later. Within moments, every member of the responding team stood perfectly still. Almost instinctively, they straightened their uniforms and respectfully saluted. The confused guests watched in complete silence. Marcus calmly reached inside his suit jacket and revealed the gold badge he had purposely hidden throughout the ceremony because he wanted everyone to celebrate the man, not the title. The badge reflected sunlight as the officers greeted him with unmistakable respect. The groom wasn't simply a police officer. He was their police chief. Shock swept through the entire property. Even officers from neighboring jurisdictions recognized the leader whose reputation for honesty and compassion had inspired departments across the state. The atmosphere transformed instantly from uncertainty into overwhelming admiration. Across the street, Linda stepped closer, expecting arrests or confrontation. Instead, she watched every officer congratulate the groom. Her confidence disappeared almost immediately. The assumptions she had built in her mind collapsed before her eyes. Neighbors who had quietly shared her suspicions lowered their heads, realizing how easily prejudice had shaped their opinions. Marcus could have embarrassed Linda publicly. He could have demanded legal consequences for filing a false report or used his authority to make an example of her. Instead, he chose something much more difficult and infinitely more powerful. He thanked the officers for responding because protecting citizens required taking every emergency call seriously. Then he reminded everyone present that communities become stronger when neighbors choose understanding instead of assumptions. Fear, he explained, often grows wherever people stop seeing one another as human beings. Real safety comes not from suspicion alone but from trust, communication, and compassion. His words carried far greater weight than anger ever could. One by one, nearby residents crossed the street. Some apologized for remaining silent while rumors spread. Others admitted they had judged the wedding before ever meeting the families attending it. Elderly guests wiped tears from their eyes as strangers shook hands for the very first time. Children who had hidden moments earlier began laughing together across the lawn, completely unaware of the barriers adults sometimes create. The reception continued, but everything felt different now. The celebration became more than a wedding. It became proof that dignity can overcome ignorance without revenge. Officers stayed only long enough to congratulate the couple before quietly leaving, their flashing lights replaced by applause and joyful music. As evening settled over the beautiful estate, golden sunlight bathed the dance floor where families from different backgrounds celebrated side by side. Conversations that would never have happened without that difficult moment filled the air. The wedding became a story remembered throughout the community, not because police arrived, but because forgiveness arrived first. Before this story ends, please write in the comments, kindness is stronger than judgment. Your words may encourage someone who needs hope today. Years later, neighbors would still remember that unforgettable afternoon. Not as the day someone called the police on a black wedding, but as the day one man's humility transformed an entire community. Marcus proved that true leadership isn't measured by rank, authority, or power. It is measured by the courage to answer prejudice with grace, fear with understanding, and hatred with compassion. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to our channel. Every interaction helps us continue sharing powerful stories that remind the world that love, forgiveness, and kindness will always be stronger than hate.
Es un señor Temón. ¿Cómo anda la gente linda? ¿Qué onda la banda? ¿Todo en orden? ¿Qué es esto? Ahora sí. ¿Por qué tenía el chat de emoticones? Ay, Dios. Y como siempre digo, ¿cómo andan las nenas lindas? ¿Todo bien? Yo hoy estoy muy contento. No me acompañan las muletas atrás. Mirá, boludo. Estamos cada día más cerca de sacarnos las muletas. Creo que el miércoles me sacan los puntos, por ende me sacan la bota, por ende me sacan las muletas y arrancamos a caminar. Otra vez. Hoy no me voy a ir a buscar un café. No, la galletita. Yo tengo el café. Una tacita. Tampoco es muy grande.